Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our 27th episode this week, where we'll be recapping the Patriots' 2021 offense and then looking at potential offseason moves on the offensive side of the football. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on New Day. So, Kevin, for this, we're thinking of going through the different position groups, kind of grading how each position group was this season, and then talking about some potential moves this offseason. So, just to start out, quarterback position, what was your grades? How do you think Mac did? And how do you see the quarterback room in general, all quarterbacks going forward for next season?
Yeah, I think we've talked about Mac a lot, so I don't think it's to be a surprise to any. I'd give him a B. I think he was above average what you were thinking for a rookie quarterback. I think he was able to show a lot of poise. He was show a lot of accuracy. If we're grading on a scale of rookies in general, I would grade him maybe even higher. But of all quarterbacks overall, I think we kind of done this dance a little bit where we kind of rank 1 through 15, 1 through 20, 1 through 30, 1 through 32 quarterbacks and see where he falls. And for this past season, he was a top 15 quarterback. So I think that puts him in the B range right there. I think to be an A, you would have to be in that top 5-ish, A minus, probably top 10. So I think he's right around there, B. Maybe you can make the argument for B plus. But I think he had a really solid year, and I think he can only build upon it. So it'd be really interesting to see what happens next year, what he comes in looking like, how much muscle he gained, how much he was able to learn over the offseason, studying film and having just that 1 year of experience under his belt. I think having Hoyer as his backup quarterback really is really helpful, and it'll especially be helpful if they re-sign him for next year. So I think that's one of the predictions I'd be looking for, that they'll try and re-sign him as one of those kind of veteran minimum. Seems like he only kind of wants to play for the Patriots going forward. His family's here, his house is here, and I don't think it seems like he wants to be traveling all over the place to be a quarterback. So I would really suspect that he may be the backup quarterback, especially because of the minimum amount they have to pay him. His familiarity with the offense will really be beneficial, especially with all these coaching changes. And I would, even though as much as he crapped his pants in high pressure situations, at least having that knowledge of like in-game management and all that sort of stuff is really helpful. I wouldn't trust him to be the quarterback and going for like the whole year and the playoffs or anything like that. But you see, he was able to take the Texans to the playoffs, and if it's not a high leverage situation, I think he'll do fine. God forbid Mac was to get hurt for a little bit, but I wouldn't suspect anything higher than that. So
yeah. So I guess for me, just going back to the grading, I'd give him a B plus. I thought he did really good as considering he was a rookie. Mm-hmm. I think one thing I just took a little issue with was you said he was an above average for a rookie quarterback. He had one of the best quarterback seasons as a rookie of all time, at least top 5, top 7 of any rookie quarterback. So I thought he did really well. I think if you're grading him on rookie scales, at least an A, you could argue maybe A plus. I don't think he was like that high for a rookie quarterback, but he was one of the best seasons statistically. He didn't have any of those what the hell rookie moments. But like I think he was an above average quarterback in the NFL. And my ranking is partially going along the scale of he was a rookie, but just also partially just being a starting quarterback in the NFL as well. I thought he just had a good year, and I think he's just going to only improve next year. But we'll have to see. I think the only thing that can hold him back is the offensive coaching, just the differences if there's a lot of difference in scheme, which I don't think there will be. Going with the quarterback room, I have to agree with you. I think having Hoyer here this year was big for him. Essentially another coach in the quarterback room to help him, a veteran that's been in the league a long time. Wasn't always the best quarterback, but has been around for 10, 12 years, a starter in multiple places. So kind of taught him the reins. And I think re-signing him is going to be a big, not a huge priority for the Patriots this offseason, but is something that they probably want to just for another familiarity with all the changes on the offensive side of the football. If for some reason they aren't able to re-sign him, I was just looking at some of the free agent quarterbacks available. one that comes to mind, which I could see, is Jacoby Brissett. I know it's a different style quarterback. He's kind of is like the perfect backup for Tua down in Miami, similar style football, but he played in this system. He's been around. He's been a starter a couple of years, so he might be someone. A couple others are Tyrod Taylor. He might be a little more, but whenever he's played, he's shown that he can at least be sufficient. And then Colt McCoy, which I don't know if he might be a little too expensive for a backup quarterback, because he was a little successful in Arizona this year. I believe he had 2 different wins when Kyler was out. But I could see them going. If they re-sign Hoyer, I expect Stiddy to be traded or cut, probably traded for like a 6th or 7th rounder, and then them going for their next developmental backup quarterback in the draft.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too with Stidham because he's going into his last year. I don't think they'll probably want to pay him too much to be a backup, where you can kind of get the same sort of development out of anyone else. And I don't think you need to kind of waste that extra money on him for that. So
if Mac wasn't a rookie, or wasn't going into only his 2nd year, I'd say they'd probably keep him, because Stidham, if they believe he is a viable backup, they might want him in case something goes wrong. If Mac gets hurt, God forbid, and then you have someone that you think is able to actually start and play some games. But with Mac still going into year 2, you kind of want that QB coach essentially in the locker room. And then if you can get that developmental guy, say in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, whoever it is, to be that backup, like a Matt Castle type, to develop them. So in case something does happen.
Yep. I think we're kind of in agreement there. Going on to the running back room. I think this one's probably pretty easy as well. We've talked a lot about running backs, and offensive line won't be a big surprise either. But I would say the running backs, I would give them an A. I think that the 2 kind of headed monster between Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson was just deadly. And hopefully we will see this for years to come with this team. Running backs isn't too many years, but Harris is going into his last year with the Patriots. So likely it's probably his last year. Usually they won't re-sign running backs, especially lead back running backs. They'll probably end up drafting someone else this year to kind of fill that void or see really kind of what happens. So, or maybe next year. But I think they were a really strong group, and I think it'll really help them going into this next year, especially with Stevenson having a full year under his belt. I think that will really help him going into this coming year. I think I actually like him even more than Harris. I think he's a lot more explosive and kind of quicker. You see him kind of not break through, but kind of slide through some sort of kind of holes that are kind of small. There's the stuff that you would see before from Damian Lewis. Is that his name, right? Damian Lewis?
Yeah.
Dante Lewis? Damian Lewis.
Dion Lewis.
The so that kind of shiftiness where you don't really expect that from that kind of bigger back. But he is kind of slimy, shifty, that sort of thing, and that really was a good facet of his game. Coming up this year, White and Bolden are their upcoming free agents. I would suspect that if White is still going to play, and I think that's a big if, because he having a hip subluxation, he is older for a running back. So I'm not sure if that injury may be career-ending. If it is, he's had a great career. If it's not, I would suspect them trying to bring him back on a low-money deal to have him here. If that doesn't happen, the Texans would probably try and send him away. But other than that, I think it's a pretty good room. Bolden, they may bring back on the cheap if they can as well. It does seem like he's going to be playing throughout. Or they may just kind of draft that kind of shifty running back, or use the want to blank on his name too. The other running back they have, JJ Taylor. But it doesn't seem like you really like him that much. So
I don't know if it's they don't like him. I think it's just the running back room was so good this year, and he's just not really the style they needed.
Yeah.
I have to agree. I have to give them an A as well. Just the 2-headed monster, like you said. They're both powerful. They're both fast, and they both, once they get contact, they're still able to keep going. But even though they are like that, they're also a slightly different style of runner too. So it's not like you're going from one to another where they're exactly the same. They are a little different too. So I think Stevenson's just going to only get better. Like you said, I think this is going to probably be Damien Harris's last year, but I think they're going to get the most out of them this year, which for going into Mac's second year, they aren't. It's going to show they don't need to rely on him as much again this year. They can rely on the running game and then just have Mac continue to develop. I think James White, I think he's only going to play with the Patriots or retire. I don't see him coming back from that type of injury. We'll have to see. Brandon Bolden, I think they'll resign him. They like him a lot. He still plays special teams. He was very valuable for them this year. Only way I don't see them resigning him is if he goes for top dollar, which he might get some money in free agency. And if that happens, they might just go with JJ Taylor. Or an interesting free agent that I could see them going after is Justin Jackson, the running back for the Chargers, where he is fast and he's able to be both third down running back as well as catch some balls out of the backfield. So I could see them going after him.
On that note, I would not like to see them go that route, just because I think we kind of feel, and maybe not as much for you since you're suggesting this, but I don't think running backs are anyone that you should pay for or try and go out of your way to sign. You can draft one and they'd be just as good as anyone else. So unless it's
agree.
low money, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I was saying more along of one of the cheaper contracts, and I think that they have too many holes, especially on defense, where you want to use those draft picks on one of those players. And then since Stevenson is only going into year 2, you still have JJ Taylor. Maybe the following year when Harris is gone, you can use a draft pick on a running back.
Yeah.
So I was saying for Jackson, like low near the league minimum, or maybe a little above that, but
okay. Next kind of positional group, and this will be probably a quick one. Fullback. So I would say this one's kind of tough because he had a pretty up and down year. I don't think he was as good as he's been in years past, or as kind of some of their other fullbacks have been. I guess really, I think he's kind of been like this his whole kind of career, is have that up and down. I would give him a C plus. I think there were a decent amount of games where he was not pulling his own weight, and it really showed. And there were some games that he did well in. So I don't think he was anything overly impressive. The interesting thing with him is he's going to be a restricted free agent, and just pulling up the tenders of what that would mean. So just kind of give a little background. There's 3 different tenders that can be given: a first round tender, which means it's at $5.5 million. So that would be how much they'd be paying them for that season. If another team wants to sign this restricted free agent, they would have to give up a first round pick in order to do that to the team. So usually most teams won't do that. Second round tender would be about close to $4 million. So again, if you're going to try and sign him away from the team, it'd be a second round pick. And then the last one's right of first refusal. So there's no compensation if another team signs them. But the team has the opportunity to try and match that other contract. And again, first and second round tenders as well. Even if the player does try and agree to terms, that team, let's say the Patriots in instance, have the chance to match that offer first. And if they don't match, that's when they get that compensation. With the right of first refusal being at $2.4 million and him being a fullback, I just can't see them paying a fullback that much money, especially him, who I don't think he's anything special. So it'd be pretty interesting to see. If I were them, I probably wouldn't even tender him at all, and then see what happens. If you can get him at like a minimum contract, do so. If not, I may be looking towards Dalton Keene, or maybe trying to draft someone in that kind of, or find someone like a unrestricted free agent, that sort of thing. Someone for a minimum that you can get, because I don't think he's worth the $2.4 million.
No, I agree entirely with you. I don't see them giving him any of the tenders. I think or going to his grade, I give him a C plus. Games where he was really good. I'm trying to think. There's one especially where I mentioned on the podcast. I don't remember if it was the Texans game or if it was the Bills game, but there's one where he was really good. But then there's others where he was just not good at all. And I think this was his best year, just because he did have some I didn't think he was great the last couple of years, but part of that's also just in comparison, he was following James Devlin, who in my opinion is one of the best blocking fullbacks in the last 20 plus years. So I could see them resigning him for near cheap, maybe like a million plus or minus a couple thousand, 100,000, but I don't see them going too much. And then if that's too much, I could see them going for just a street free agent or in the draft, like 7th round or undrafted free agent.
Okay.
Or Dalton Keene too. The only thing with Dalton Keene is I could see them moving him to fullback and using him like they used Patrick Pass back in the early 2000s, more of a receiving tight end, a little blocking. But if they want to go with the power football like they did the last couple of years, you kind of need that blocking fullback like a James Devlin. So if they want to keep going with that, I don't know if they'll rely solely on Keene, but they might also move Jonnu Smith to fullback at some points too, use like a combination.
Mm-hmm.
So be interesting to see.
Yeah. Next positional group, wide receivers. I would give this group. This one's tough too. I would say a B minus. I think that for what they are. Actually, I'm going to go down more. I'm going to give them a C plus as well. Yeah. They're a little bit better than average. I think Bourne obviously is their best player that they have there, and that's something that we've kind of talked about this whole kind of season. He's the best playmaker. He's only going to get better.
Season before the season started.
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, he's definitely the one that you want to get the ball in their hands. And I think having that year under his belt with the team and understanding the offense more, he'll know more of where to be at the right position. I think that'll only help him. So I think he was their best player. Myers as well is always really dependable. He's nothing great though. He's going to be catching. He catches it where he needs to be, but the separation that he is able to get, it does take him some time to get some separation. So that's the only thing where I kind of pull back the grading from him. He's very dependable. He
reminds me of a slower David Givens.
Yeah. So he's always where you want him to be, and he has a pretty good relationship with Mac. It's just that for what position they're playing him in, that slot, he's just not quick enough to be that kind of speedy slot to get open right away and to be that first kind of target where you have 2 seconds to throw the ball. Who am I throwing it to? And he's still not open yet because he can't shift out and kind of break away from the cornerback. That's the only thing where I'm kind of knocking him there. And then I think Al Galore, statistically, he didn't have a great season. I think part of that was having Mac as the rookie. They're not doing too much downfield threat. And I think a lot of the things were too where they didn't have a great line at the beginning of the season, and Mac didn't have the time to throw those deeper balls because he didn't have the time to kind of see what was open. So I think having an improved offensive line really would help him in this situation. I'm not putting too much against him here. I'm not one of those ones that said, "Oh, he's awful," and you got to get rid of him. He had less than 50 catches and less than 1,000 yards, and you're paying him $12 million. I don't think all of it's his fault. I think part of it is having Mac, and then part of it's them not trying to do too much on the offensive line. And then receivers in this system as well. It does take some time. So those are kind of the big three. And the only other thing of note would be Gunner. He's the out of the situation where, actually both Gunner and Myers are restricted free agents. Myers, I would see it probably a 2nd round tender because he is still valuable to you. And the 2nd round tender being at close to $4 million, I don't think that's a terribly overpaying for him.
Yeah, I think it's like a little more than their comfort zone, but I think they're going to go with it. And then just one thing of note is just for restricted free agents. Last year, we signed J.C. Jackson to the 2nd round tender, and no team gave up a 2nd round pick for J.C. Jackson at that. What was it, 3.5 or $4 million last year? So it's usually not that common you see unless it's a really good player. But
yeah, Wes Welker was a 2nd round.
He was
tender.
a second. Yep.
And then Gunner being the other one, I can't imagine them paying again, even for a right of first refusal, $2.4 million, unless they expect him to do more in the receiving game. Yep. And I don't think that's going to be the case, judging by he's been with the team now for This will be his
third year. He just
third
finished
year.
his third year.
Yeah, he just finished his third year.
That's why he's restricted.
Yeah. So with him not doing much in the receiving game over 3 years, I can't imagine them thinking it's going to develop even more afterwards. But maybe there's some stuff they see behind the scenes, and when maybe they'll do the right of first refusal. He definitely isn't getting anything higher than that. But that's
yeah.
kind of the
Just
other
one thing on
situation.
that last note about Gunnar is Edelman didn't really start playing receiver until his 5th year. So they could see him as that. I don't think they'll pay him $2.5 million. I think they'll try and no one's going to sign him to that. So I think they'll try and possibly sign him as a free agent. But Edelman, his first year had like 37 catches, 350 yards, and then was in the single digits the next couple of years in catches. So it's not really a knack, especially for someone that didn't really play wide receiver in college. But I don't know if at that pay rate, I think depending on what money he's going to get on the open market versus what they're willing to pay, I think there's a chance 50-50 comes back or is gone. For my rating, I'd agree. I put them as C plus, partially just because they weren't great. They weren't able to get much separation, but that's also who they are. I think Bourne, as I've been saying since the preseason and offseason, you just have to get him the ball. You have to get him more involved. Part of it could have just been he wasn't used to the offense, didn't really know it, so they weren't felt comfortable putting him in different situations. But with a whole nother offseason under his belt, another year to develop with Mac, I think he's going to he took a big step this year. I think he's going to take that next step next year where he's going to be possibly 1,200 yards from scrimmage, receiving and running, 60, 70 catches. I think he will take that next step. The thing with Aguilar, moving on to Aguilar, is I do agree with you. Part of it is first half of the year, the offensive line wasn't able to hold up. Another thing that kind of just makes it tough for me to really gauge is I also don't know how much of his presence, like I know a lot of people based on his contract, they want to get rid of him, but his presence as being a deep threat, if teams had to devote more resources to double over the top, which allowed receivers to get open underneath. So I don't know if just his speed alone was able to do that. So that's why I think you have to be a little hesitant of getting rid of him or someone of his nature, unless you're going to replace him with someone of his speed. And Mac, they did have some good throws to each other. I know the Chargers one for me sticks out where it was the deep ball to him. He does have that explosive threat. Having another year under his belt to learn the system and develop with Mac as well might be able to take that step where have a season similar to when he was with the Raiders. I think Myers will be back at the second round tender of $4 million. N'Keal Harry was someone you didn't mention. I think he's either traded or cut. I don't think there's any way they bring him back. No. Couple interesting wide receivers. I was just looking at some of the free agent wide receivers that might be some potential options. I don't think they're going to go after any of the big guys. So I know some people are seeing like Allen Robinson, Chris Godwin. I don't think any of them are coming. The only way any of them is Chris Godwin if he takes a 1-year deal, since he's going to be out until like November, probably because of his ACL. Someone like him, if they take like a 1-year prove it deal or
I could see maybe Robinson though, just based because he had that down year last year. So if teams are judging him off of that year, not because of the kind of the quarterback situation, if they're able to get him for like a 1-year low money, not low money, but low for him money contract, I could see that where his value is a lot. It's a pretty good value for him for that talent. That's the only kind of situation where maybe it might happen, but it also depends on how do teams view him. Do they view him as, was this just a one down year because he had Fields and he had the redheaded monster throwing to him, or was it just is he maybe on a downturn, or maybe he's not as good as people think? So I think that's the kind of one thing to note about kind of seeing where the market is for him. If the market isn't too great for him, I could maybe see that happening.
No, I think that's a fair point. I think for me though, I don't see that happening, so I don't think it's even a consideration. But if that does happen, I could see them going after him. Just a couple names that kind of stick out to me that could be flyers is number one, Isaiah McKenzie of Buffalo Bills. He torched you twice, and Bill usually likes to sign people that torched him, like Wes Welker. So
Mhm.
I could see that, but after having those games, he might get some more money from other teams. So tough to really say. A couple others are two different Packers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's a free agent. Had a little production his years in Green Bay. Averaged anywhere from 400 to 700 yards, anywhere from 2 to 6 touchdowns a year. So I could see him as like a lower money free agent wide receiver. Another one, Alan Lazar, averaged between 450 and 500 yards the last 3 years. One interesting one, I don't know money wise if he's going to get more money, but bringing back Braxton Berrios, where if you get rid of Gunner, he's someone that in the receiving game has actually shown that he can catch it. I think it was the Jets leading receiver last year with 400 yards, which is kind of sad that. But anyway, 46 catches, 400 yards. He could be that maybe like a poor man's Julian Edelman, Wes Welker. I feel like I don't feel comfortable putting him in that level yet, but a slot receiver able to get you 50 catches for 500 yards. And he was all pro kick returner last year. So he's just an interesting one. He was with the Patriots before, so someone to just keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point where I forget to mention him. If they are going to sign a receiver, it's probably going to be someone of that caliber. Their biggest need, we mentioned this kind of the whole season and definitely at the end, they need that speedy slot. They need someone where Matt can go 1, 2, 3 step, drop, throw. And they don't have that right now. Bourne is
I think
probably one
Bourne
of them.
can be that,
But the thing with Bourne is he's just not big enough to be in that slot position the whole
yeah,
season because he'll get hurt because he's very slender.
yeah,
So they need someone that can be built to go into the slot. So having a quick, speedy slot that can handle the whole season. And I'm just not sure Bourne could do that. I think Bourne has the quickness and the speed, but he may be on the kind of the outside. So
yeah.
I
Especially
think if oh, go ahead.
just gonna say if Mac threw some balls that he threw to Jacoby Myers, Bourne would have been killed this year.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know how Myers never got hurt from because he almost killed him like 5 or 6 times
Yeah.
at least, maybe 10. And it was a bit probably closer to 10 because it was almost either every game or every other game we were mentioning that. So I think that's one key note. They're probably more likely to hit this in the draft, I would think. This is supposed to be a pretty deep wide receiver draft. But I also hold my breath knowing that where 4 years ago was a pretty deep wide receiver draft, and you got probably one of the worst ones of the bunch. So
3 years ago.
Whatever it is, man. It feels like 4 or 5 years. So there are some good candidates out there. We'll get into that when it gets close to the draft, but there are some kind of pretty interesting names that are some people that kind of mimic some either former pros. So it'll be pretty interesting when we break that down. Anything else on wide receivers you'd like to get to?
No, that's all I got. Receivers in the draft, I'll cover when we do our draft special.
All right. Tight ends. This one, the grading is going to seem off just because you have to grade all the tight ends. I feel like you can't just have one kind of overshine it. So I'm going to give them a C+ for tight ends. I think Hunter Henry was actually, I'm going to give him a straight C. I think Hunter Henry was probably a B+. The only thing where I'm not going to bring him to A level is his blocking is not that good. So to be a well-rounded tight end, you have to be able to block, you have to be able to catch, and his blocking is not that great. So that's kind of the one knock on him. But as
I have another knock on him. Just sorry to cut in, but I don't know if you're going to get to or not. But the thing with him that just wasn't able to turn around. Just seemed like he was too slow. Where Mac would throw him the ball and it was right where he should have been, but he just was too slow in recognizing it. Which I don't know if having a full offseason under his belt with Mac, developing that chemistry, if that will turn it around, or if Henry is just someone that's slow and that's something that's not able to be really corrected much.
Yeah, I think that's something that can be corrected, and I think that's something that Mac, at least being in his second year, could kind of get on him at, where it's kind of hard being that rookie quarterback going and kind of yelling at him. If that was Brady, I think he would have yelled at him, torn to him, to turn his head around and not try and juke out at everyone and just make a catch. Where there's many, at least 5 to 10 instances this year where it happened. It happened multiple
I
times in
think it's
games
more than that.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where he's trying to do too much to get open and then he just doesn't even see the ball coming because of that. So I think those are the two biggest things on him. The reason why it's a B plus and not a B because of that is just his reliability and his kind of cohesion with Mac was really well, and he's a good red zone target for him. He was probably a second favorite target this year besides Jacoby. So I think he was a really good part of this team, and I think he's only going to get better for next year, assuming he still stays healthy. This was, I think, the first year in his career he actually played all season. So kind of hoping that maybe the injury bug is kind of gone from him, like some players where they kind of outgrow it. The reason why it's a C though, and that could still be being generous, where maybe it might even need to be lower based on everyone else, is number one, you have no output from anyone else. Jonnu Smith was terrible this year. He was at being nice. He was a D. You could give him an F too. His blocking wasn't great. His blocking was terrible. He couldn't.
His blocking was average. It wasn't well, but it was better than you got from Henry. But I think it was like adequate.
He led the team in pressures allowed.
Yeah.
So he was not great, and you got to think the offensive linemen are blocking way more than he is. So just the amount of pressures and just his blocking in general wasn't good. And he's supposed to actually be semi good at blocking. He was supposed to be the more well-rounded tight end of the two. And it's just, I'm hoping that he needs the 1 year to kind of acclimate, get himself ready, learn the system, everything like that. Maybe it's too much. He's definitely thinking way too much when he's out there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the one thing where hopefully he'll get it after this year. I think we'll know going into the second year if he's going to be a bust or not. After I'd say at the quarter point, we'll basically be able to tell. If he doesn't get it by then, he's not going to be able to get it.
And then another thing with him, I believe he didn't go to OTAs this past year.
He was hurt.
Okay. So I wasn't sure if that was part of the reason why it took him a while he didn't pick up the offense because he didn't go to OTAs.
Yeah, he didn't go to the not mandatory one. The mandatory ones, he was hurt he pulled his hamstring the first one. Yeah. So and that was probably because he wasn't getting enough in shape beforehand. So that's one thing. But with him, his blocking and then the catching, he had to stop every single time he was making a catch. It was looking like he was trying to grab a baby out of midair. It wasn't fluid. It was overthinking way too much. And I think that Saints game really just made him completely lost out there. Yeah, and because he didn't look this bad in the first 2 games. I think it all stemmed from having that one really bad Saints game, and then he just never kind of recovered from there. And it's just that baby image, just I can never get out of my head, where it just stopped. And
the Buffalo game,
every game, it's like when he was trying to catch the ball, he had to stop and make sure he was catching it, and he never had anything in motion. So, and that was something he was known to be well at. So, it'll be interesting to see for this coming year.
Yeah, no, for me, I was thinking B minus, but then the more I thought about it, I went with C plus for the position group, just for pretty much everything you said. Mm-hmm. Henry was reliable when like Mac had a lot of time to throw. It was just when he needed to get open quick, he'd be slow and wasn't able to turn around or see the ball coming. Mm-hmm. But when he saw the ball coming, I don't think he had a drop the entire season. He led the league, or was at least led tight ends for most targets without a drop. Mm-hmm. So he was reliable in the red zone, especially. And he was someone that Mac looked to. His blocking was pretty bad. So there was the knock on that. Jonnu I went into the year thinking Jonnu was going to, I know like in fantasy, I'm thinking fantasy football wise, mm-hmm. but I thought going into the year, Jonnu Smith was going to just take that next step, sort of be like a mix between Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, because he has that like, elusiveness. He that athletic ability where he'd be able to use them in a lot of different ways. It's just they weren't able to get him the ball much. I'm really hoping having this full offseason under his belt to learn the playbook, to learn with Mac, that they'll get on the same page, and then you can use him a lot of different ways. Use him for the occasional run or throw to him, catch, get some yards after the catch. Use him in the red zone because he is a big target too. And if his blocking can get a little better, I think it just all stems back to that Saints game where he was just horrendous and he just was overthinking everything after that. If he has a whole offseason to decompress, get it out of his system, and then get on the same page, I'm hoping that he'll get better. But we'll have to see. I'm going to Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene. It just annoys me that they wasted third round draft picks on both of them. I know Asiasi, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's been working out with Kendrick Bourne in Oregon this offseason. So maybe he is athletic and fast. So I don't see them keeping both because you already have two tight ends and offense is playmakers are kind of all set. So I think they'll get rid of one, keep one, or get rid of both. So we'll have to see. I don't expect much production from either of them this upcoming season, but you never know. Something could surprise you.
Yeah, I think they could keep both if they did move on from Jakob and wanted to go that more athletic route at fullback. I could see that happening.
That's fair.
Moving on to the offensive line altogether and kind of go into each position. I'd say offensive line overall, I'd give them a C. Just because they had a really up and down year. That first half of the year, first at least third of the year, they were really bad. And then they did that moving around. They had a one no play right tackle, which we had called for from kind of the beginning of the season, and had Steady Teddy kind of hold down the fort at left guard. And then it really kind of solidified things until kind of the end, and where it started to kind of fall apart a little more near the end. In going to each positional groups, I think Wynn at left tackle. If I were them, I'd be heavily considering trying to move on from him this year and try and trade him. He has a $10 million cap hit. I don't think he's worth that at this point. The only way I would maybe not do that is just it is going to be his contract year. And it could be kind of interesting to see what he'll do and what he'll put his body in to be ready for that contract year. He's going to kind of go all out, and maybe he'll get the best out of him in that instance. So maybe wait till training camp, see how he shows up, see what happens, and if he shows up the same way he showed this year, then kick him out. But I wouldn't be overly upset if they did move on from him.
The one thing with that though is they're really tight against the cap. So I think if they're gonna get rid of him, it's gonna be earlier on in the offseason where another team's looking for a left tackle and you can trade, or even maybe a right tackle or guard, whatever they think is useful. And 10 million for a starting left tackle isn't a lot. So I could see them. I think if they keep him going into training camp, they're going to stick with him unless he shows up out of shape and just isn't able to stick with it. Just with them being that up against the cap, they're going to need cap space, and he's someone that they could get 10 million open by trading him.
I could also see them waiting though too, because the cap space for 10 million, even though it is a lot, the amount of cap space they can open up with just some simple moves in the beginning of the offseason, they have a decent amount of them that they can do where they wouldn't have to actually get rid of him to open up that cap space. So converting a lot of different things into signing bonuses and that sort of thing. They do have the option to do that with a lot of different players. Going into Trent Brown at right tackle, I think he was a disappointment this year because of all the games that he missed due to that calf. And the same sort of issue happened in Oakland for him. And I just think that when he was there in the beginning, after he came back from injury, I think he played pretty well until kind of the end of the season. He kind of fell off the wayside there near the end. I don't think he played as great as he did when he first came back. But so I don't really suspect either of these. I'm kind of rambling here. I don't really suspect either of these tackles coming back. I won't be surprised. Brown's a free agent when they could trade him. I would definitely think that Owenu will be the starting right tackle next year. Left tackle will be either win if they keep him, or I think Haran did actually play decently well at left tackle this year. He played a lot better at left tackle than right tackle. So I could see them going that route and having that one additional year, get a little bit stronger, get bigger, would work out for him. What are your thoughts on the tackle situation and the
Yeah,
offensive line overall?
I think offensive line overall, I have to go with C plus. First half of the year was, or first 6 games, 5 games, up until the Texans, up until before the Texans game, it was absolutely atrocious. That was holding them back, and they almost got Mac killed. If Jimmy G was our quarterback, he would have been gone down game 1, maybe game 2. He would have might have made it 2 if he was lucky. But then it just seemed to click as the season went on, right in the Texans game all the way through until near the end, right until around the Colts game. Like that stretch, they were really pulling their own weight. They were one of the strengths on this team, which is what we thought going into the season. And then just as the season got on, they kind of got worn down and kind of lost some of that. But overall, I think Isaiah Wynn is going to be back. Only way I don't is if I think they'll have either Isaiah Wynn or they'll have Trent Brown, one or the other. I don't see them keeping both. I don't see them getting rid of both either. I could see them bring back Brown on another 1 year or a cheaper deal. He was effective in the pass rush and running game especially, and they do. He has been effective for them, so I could see them bring him back. But with having a Wenu and Isaiah Wynn under contract next year, I don't know if they will. Then, like I said about Wynn, I think with him, I think it depends on what they think they'll get out of him. If they think he'll be like average or below, I could see them getting rid of him for another team and then using Justin Haran, like you said, or Trent Brown. But if I had a guess, I'd say when you right tackle, Win left tackle to start the season.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. Moving forward to guards, I think this is pretty quick. I think when Steady Terry took over, I think that really helped kind of solidify that position. I think he actually outperformed Owenu at left guard, and was just a really kind of solid force there. Nothing like overly special, but was a really solid position there. And then Mason, I think, had a decent year this year. I know he's kind of had some up and down seasons lately, but I think this one was pretty good for him. And really no complaints there for that. I think Owenu, just kind of going back into the guard situation, he's much better as a right tackle. And I think that definitely kind of proved it. And not that he was bad as a left guard, but he's much better as a tackle, I think, than a guard. So I think it'd be in his best interest and the Patriots' best interest for this coming year. Try and bring back Karras. I can't imagine him costing that much money. It's a guard. He's nothing special. He's not like a Joe Tooney, that type of player. I could see them bring him back at hopefully not too much money, and then moving Owenu over to tackle.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I really like Karras this year. We were saying essentially from halftime of game 1 against the Dolphins that he should be starting at left guard when Trent Brown went down. Thing with him is I really don't know what his market's going to be. I could see him getting a decent amount since he started, and Patriots just not feeling comfortable paying him that, and then them going to the draft and drafting someone in the 5th round and having them start. They've had success in the draft going with offensive linemen, so I could see that happening. Another thing is I thought Shaq Mason had a really good year. Not as good as years past, but he was still a very productive right guard. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up actually trading or cutting him this offseason, though. If you look at his cap, if they cut him, it's $3 million in dead cap, but it's $7 million in cap savings. Same if he's traded. So that $7 million, especially if they really like someone in the draft or they re-sign Ted Karras cheap, they could use that for other means. And I could see them moving on from Mason. I'd say it's probably 65, 70 or 70% they keep him, but I wouldn't be shocked if they end up getting rid of him just for the potential cap savings. And he is going into his last year of his deal, I believe.
Yeah. I think it's a kind of a good point. We kind of agree on. I wouldn't be shocked if he was cut. This is kind of one of those typical Belichick
Oh, he has 2 more years on his deal. Sorry.
Yeah, this is one of those typical like salary implications where he's getting paid a lot of money. He is getting not really up there, but he's getting older in age. I could definitely see him trying to either rework his contract or maybe the cut or trade him. So I wouldn't be surprised there. I don't think it will happen, like you said, but it wouldn't shock me either way.
Yeah.
And then going to center, David Andrews. Not really much to say there. Really
Love
well
me
there.
some Dirty Dave.
He'll be back next year. He's on a great contract for them. So nothing to really complain there. One of your best offensive linemen there.
Yeah. I know he had a couple of shaky games here and there, especially after the birth of his son, but I don't know if it was coincidental or not, if that happened to be like that. But down the stretch, the last 10 games of the season, you could argue he was one of, if not your best players on the entire team. He was just so dependable, and he set that tone. And I like you said, he's on a great deal. So I was so glad they re-signed him, and he's just one of your leaders in this entire team.
Yep. I think that kind of wraps up the whole offense. I think one thing I just want to kind of go back on and talk about Mac for just a second, because it's just kind of thinking about kind of some of the chatter around the league and stuff that we've heard. Just listening to kind of some other national kind of podcasts and that sort of thing, saying, "Oh, do they really have their quarterback of the future, arm strength, all that sort of stuff?" I think and I think we mentioned this after the Bills game, but just even reflecting on it more, I think the amount that we saw from that Bills playoff game, and really Mac this whole season, everything that he did, going up and down against Tom Brady, battling against Dak Prescott, just the amount of energy and resolve that he has to try and win the game, and everything he did in that Bills game to try and win it, where he looked like he was the only
Bills playoff game.
What did I say?
You just said Bills game, but some people, when they think the Bills game, might think of the 3 passing game.
Okay, yeah, no, the Bills playoff game. The amount of stones and that he shows and resolve that he has, it just, I think, and then the ability, and I know some people were just wondering how he would be in the cold because he's never played in the cold, and that was a fair question to ask. And everything that he had kind of shown there, he proved that the cold's not an issue for him. He was throwing pretty well in the cold. He had that awesome pass that was an even better play by the Bill safety to intercept it on that deep pass. So I think that they're in a pretty good spot going forward for not only for next year, but for their future in general with him. And I don't think the critics that are bashing him even really watch the games fully. And that's kind of one of the things you see with national media. And then just the other point where we've kind of talked about this before, that misconception that he's slow and that he's a statue and he's not athletic. His 40 time was the same time as Patrick Mahomes. Not saying that he's
he ran a 4.68, I believe, and Mahomes ran a 4.72.
Yeah, and not saying that he's Patrick Mahomes or anything like that, but he's not slow. We saw that again in the Bills game. We saw him eluding
in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, we saw him at the Pro Bowl. We saw him eluding different players and making some decent runs. Not that he's going to be a running quarterback first, but he does have the ability where he can kind of escape. He can kind of roll out, throw in the run, stuff that we didn't really see with Brady. It's stuff that we saw with Jimmy when Jimmy was here in the 3 games he played. I think he's kind of more along those lines where he can maneuver a little bit. He can definitely maneuver in the pocket decently well, especially for a rookie. He's probably one of the best pocket awareness that I've seen. But even just moving around outside of the pocket, he's not terrible. And I think that people get hung up on him not being like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or Russell Wilson. You don't have to be one of those quick players, but he's still pretty decently athletic.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think that those are some really good points you brought up. And I know I've saw some Patriots fans after the season saying they don't think he's the guy because he wasn't able to lead a comeback win. But if you look at every single game, he put them in a position to at least have a shot to win. It was the defense that either didn't get the ball one last time or gave up the lead. They were every single time. He never folded under pressure. If he had a bad play, he came back. Like the Cowboys game, for instance, he had the pick six to Diggs. Next play, he had the 75-yard touchdown pass to Kendrick Bourne.
Mhm.
He has some stones, and the thing with him, I love, but I'm also just a little like every time I see it, I just get a little scared. Is he plays tough where he's willing to like try and push the pile or like lead block, and I
Mhm.
just don't want him to get injured doing something like that. But I love his all
Mhm.
out. I'm gonna try and do anything I can to win, which you don't see from quarterbacks that much, if at all.
Yep, and that is
And
something we saw from Brady. So I would expect it will start to die down where they're going to yell at him and say, you can't
yeah,
be doing that sort of stuff. So I don't think it'll be going forward too much longer. But I do like that presence that he has, like you said.
yeah, and then just I know a lot of people say, oh, he doesn't have a. This is going to
Mhm.
be his ceiling, which I don't know how you can say that about a rookie. And then I know he like didn't. He was everyone was saying he was the most NFL ready, but you have to remember he only played 1 year of college. It's not like he played 4 years,
Mhm.
and I think he's just going to keep getting better. Brady wasn't a deep passer his first year. He didn't really wasn't really good at the deep ball until year 3 or 4. It's just gonna, I think, as long as he's fingers crossed he stays healthy, I think he's just gonna keep getting better, and it's just gonna come with strength, the deep ball. And then just another thing is with him, if he does take that next step, we saw Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow take step from year 1 to year 2. I don't know if Mac will take that next step as big as them, but I could see him being a top 10 quarterback next year. We argued he was right around that 11, 12, 13 range. And with Brady retiring, that's one less quarterback. And then there's like the Kyler Murray's, Dak Prescott's, who are Kirk Cousins. You could see him getting into that top 10 and then having a really strong running attack, throwing in a lot more play action to allow that deep pass or open up the play. I think he's going to really take a next step forward.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. I think we talked about this, not on the pod, but just on the side where this year he's top 15 quarterback, pretty really good for a rookie quarterback. Next year, I could see him pushing that top 10, and then eventually being pushing a top 5.
Yeah.
It's up to him to see how far he gets in there. He doesn't have the athletic ability of Mahomes or Josh Allen, but he does have his mind that kind of puts him over the top, where Brady doesn't have the athletic ability of those two, but
Yeah.
is above them. So should be interesting to see. Anything else you'd like to talk about the offense before we wrap up here?
No, I think that's it. I think we pretty much covered it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back next week, talk about the defense, and then also kind of start previewing the upcoming free agency in the coming weeks. So March 16th is the official start of free agency. The 14th is that tampering period where we'll probably be hearing a whole bunch of stuff coming out then. So thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Again, on YouTube, if you're following us on the RSS feed, we're available on YouTube there. And make sure you subscribe there, like any of the videos. We keep on posting, getting some content up, and eventually one day we will have a blog up. It is coming slowly but surely. All right. Thank you very much, and talk to you guys next week.